so, and then yeah, we will um, just actually get started with the real topic here, as we get to the top of the hour. Because I know some people, you have scheduling conflicts or whatever. Maybe you had an early morning meeting. I know corporately, whenever I was, um, in working for companies, oftentimes I would have, 6 and 7 o'clock meetings as well. And so, yeah, I mean, I can actually see now that the LinkedIn part is live. So I want to try and let them know as well that we're live on Zoom too. So 1 second, folks. All right. Yeah, so I'm not going to do a lot of interacting actually with the LinkedIn audience. So I'll try and watch for their questions. I will try and do my best to answer any questions that they may have. Um, but the thing is, it's very hard to like continually go between the two platforms and chat, right? So I'm watching your questions here live. So I will be watching, those as we get going here as well. All right. Here we go, folks. So welcome to the webinars that convert. I look forward to our conversation today. And as we get started, one of the things that I just want to try and remind folks, so you can post your questions if you're on LinkedIn down in the comments section. I will see those. I'm watching live as we're here. Also, if you want to join us on Zoom, all you have to do if you're on LinkedIn is click the link below, and then that will send you the link to join us here on Zoom. And for the folks that are here on Zoom with me, if you'll click that reaction button as we go through, I'll be watching for your reactions. I also will be watching for any questions that you might have as well. So let's hop right in to webinars that convert. So one of the things that a lot of people don't know about my story, right, is that the embarrassing truth that I have is that I had about a 2,000 person email list several years ago, and with that list, what I thought that I would have is this big breakthrough moment for my business. And what instead happened was I had set a webinar for 5 p.m. on Tuesday, and only two people showed up to this particular webinar. It was one of those situations where I'd done all kinds of planning. I'd spent all kinds of time on the topic, on building out exactly what I thought it could be. I spent time, sending out that initial email that said, "Hey, let's get on this webinar and let me teach you a particular topic that I was consulting in at that point in time." And with that, only two people showed up. It was kind of humiliating, but I really wanted to understand, how is it that other people have these situations where they have, sometimes hundreds of people or even thousands of people show up to a webinar, but in this case, I didn't. And so I knew there was some sort of difference that I had that other people didn't have, and I wanted to understand that. And that's what I'm going to share with you today is the broader system that I built since then that actually starts to attract people. I have corporations reach out to me now that say, "Hey, look, I'd like to understand how is it that we start attracting people that we're starting to see our competitors get that work with you for their webinars." And so, from my perspective, it's one of those things that I just thought that this is a great teaching moment, I think, for a lot of people, and I thought I would share the elements of that system here today. So who am I? So I have 15 years studying conversion psychology. I've actually in depth spent time, on this specific topic, really looking at what does it take to get people to convert to your solution. I also have worked for Fortune 500 companies. I also work as a startup consultant, and so I've spent a lot of time both in big companies and small companies. I kind of understand the dynamics between them both. And then most importantly, I've seen a lot of proven results as well because of the system that I built, and so have others. So, what you're going to see today and what we're going to go through today is a 6 step webinar conversion formula that will really help you draw people in and attract your ideal audience with the Great Promise framework. It also will clearly indicate what you're going to teach people in the webinar, the psychology of free gifts, and the things that people look for in those gifts, the transformation story structure. So, how do you tell your transformation story? How do you go through that difficulty and the things that you've had throughout time? The Also, you want to teach content that creates desire. And then at the very end, you want a natural sales transition without pushy tactics. It's one of my biggest things as well. One of the things that I wanted to sort of mention to folks here, and I will drop the link, down into um, the answers here in the Q&A, is that I would love for you to go back and join the school community that I've created called Content and Conversion. And so content and conversion is going to have the webinar replay today. So in the classroom, I've already built the webinars that convert section here, and you can see some of the other classes that I have here. And in this community, we'll have the ability as well to talk about things that you're currently struggling with and how I might be able to help you with those things. And so what I wanted to just, quickly do for folks is just give you the invite code. And so I'm going to copy it here. I'm going to paste it over here in the answer line, in the answer section for folks. And so I just wanted to provide that as well. So um, yeah. So I will provide that, and then yeah, let's come back to the topic here. So as we go back to webinars that convert, one of the things that I want to just sort of to share with you is just this idea overall that there's an opportunity to sort of break down the way that you think about having webinars, and whenever you're sort of building those moments, I want you to kind of think of those moments and the ways that webinars can get better, right? So each and every time that you have your webinar, how is it getting better? How are you teaching better? How are you sort of going back and forth through things? One of the things I'd love to hear from you, so if you wouldn't mind in the comments section for me as well, just paste in the word yes if you've had a situation as well where a situation as well where you've had a challenging webinar that didn't convert the way that you had hoped. And so I'd really appreciate knowing that. And then hey, you're in good company. You can certainly let us know there. So yeah, would love to see that as well in the comments. Seeing lots of yeses come in, so it's great to know that I am in good company. I'm certainly not not sharing something that other people have had. So what are some of the examples of things that I've gotten from webinars that I've helped people host? I've actually had one of my clients come back and tell me, hey, look, after the second webinar that they had with me, they actually had two $5 million deals come in because of those webinars. And so they were extremely excited. I don't feel yeah, I couldn't get with the client beforehand to actually share their name, but yeah, so they felt extremely excited that they were able to actually bring in those deals after the webinar. Somebody saw something that really engaged them, and they felt like hey, look, they wanted to reach out to the company and work with them. The second one here is so the story of Danny. He may be on with us actually today. And Danny's story is that he had lots of webinars with his friends only. So he had plenty of friends that would show up to webinars, and it's great to have your friends. Certainly, would love to do that, especially if they're people that you can work with. But in Danny's case, he felt like a lot of the people, that he had as friends, weren't exactly his ideal client either. And in one of the webinars that we had, he had 70 potential leads. So he had, quite a few people that signed up for his webinar that weren't necessarily just, a group of friends that he had. And these aren't outliers, right? They're typical results of some of the things that we're going to go through today as we talk about things. So what is a great promise? So the title in your webinar actually does 70% of the selling work that that you have for your webinar. So you think about the fact that a lot of these people are either going to a social media page or they're going to a web page, and the average landing page actually only converts on its own anywhere between 2 to 5% by itself. Where great webinar titles really help with conversion is that they help to convert anywhere between 25 to 40% of your overall traffic. And so the formula here for the great promise is the following. It's how to get a desired outcome in some time frame without a common obstacle. And this is one example that I would give you that is really important as well, that as you start to break down how you're going to write this, you want to think through what is the outcome that people are actually going to get from attending your webinar. What are they going to get? Most people are very skeptical whenever they click on a link, whenever they go to some place to sign up for a thing. They don't know whether or not if they're going to get spammed or if they're actually going to get some benefit out of it. And so what I would tell you is that this framework actually starts to tell them what that outcome is. And so, how does this look whenever you put it into practice? I didn't feel like it was one of those things where it was that I could just share with you the the formula, right? I feel like I need to actually give you some examples so you know how to apply this. So one of them is maybe in the before, it could have been in my example, webinar marketing tips. Or the after could be how to get 1,000 webinar attendees in 30 days without spending a fortune on ads. What you want to try and do is address their deepest desire, not just the surface wants, but their deepest desire. So think about, how do I get to that next level of the outcome that they actually want in the end? And maybe it's spending a fortune on ads. Maybe it's without spending a ton of effort trying to, individually invite all of those people, or, there could be a lot of outcomes that people could struggle with. And one of the things that I say a lot to people as well is, take these titles out and go and test them. Don't just take my word for it and apply the formula and then not test it, right? In terms of testing it, I want to go through a couple of different examples here, just so that you get a sense of what it looks like to test your webinar title. So one of the websites, and you're not going to be able to see the address, but again, I'll post it in the chat here, but it's called Answer the Public. And Answer the Public, I tell people all the time to use this website. Answer the Public is a great place to go whenever you're trying to figure out what is it that people Google? How do people ask questions on Google, so that I know specifically how to apply this thing? So whenever you get your title and you've got kind of, here's the main subject that I want to talk about, why not go figure out how often people actually look for this thing? And so Answer the Public is one of those sites. We'll see whether or not, if it forces me to log in, I may have to, unfortunately log into it as well. No, it actually is, it's already in here. So you could see that I use this tool myself. So one of the things, let's just say that, maybe my topic is implementing ERP. Maybe that's my topic for today. And so, I could see that out of implementing ERP at a high level, maybe that's the very first, sort of indicator of what I, what my audience might be, right? So I've got 2,400 people roughly every single month that look for this thing. I wouldn't pay attention to the cost per click number. Essentially, this is if you're going to go run ads, this is what it would look like for you, right? So that's an indicator of that. I don't really pay much attention to that. So now I come down here and it says there are 3 key questions it looks like that people ask. When implementing an ERP for your company, you should. This other one, challenges when implementing ERP, might actually make a good webinar title, challenges when implementing an ERP and how to avoid the top 10 mistakes that everybody makes or something. Um, I'm trying to read on the side here, folks. So when implementing an ERP system, you as a leader should. So how do how do you support your team? And up at the top, one of the things that they have up here is like they have the prepositions, they have the comparisons. They list it in alphabetical ways, and then you can also get to a table. You don't have to just have that graphical look, right? So this is the table view. It's not as pretty as the other one. And then these are prepositions. So implementing an ERP is to increase, and then this one, implementing an ERP to make a difference. And then the comparisons down here. So this just gives you a lot of ways to brainstorm that initial title. So as I'm thinking about the title that I'm going to have, how do I think about different ways that I should phrase things? And then also I would say the secondary way to get the same level of information here is to use our friend Google. So I'm going to use the same tab here, and I'm just going to go back out to Google. And in the Google case, what I would do is just type in my same topic and watch what happens. All right. So I typed in implementing ERP and I've got all of these things under it. Implementing ERP systems, implementing ERP to make a difference. These are things, what Google does is they use the text that all of us type into Google, and they add that to the people also ask, right? So in this case, it's going out and performing a quick query to come back with all of those alternate titles that people also ask for. And so in this case, it's telling me, hey, look, these are things that people also search for on Google using that thing. And so, just to give you another tool here, that's a secondary tool that I would mention to you is I would definitely use Google and Answer the Public and get out there and use your title, really to test it out and see, at the end of the day, does this thing, really resonate with people or not? I can tell you if there's a word mismatch, just a simple word mismatch, Google will pass it by, and so will some of the social media platforms as well. And so you want to think about, like, how do I get this thing, at the end of the day, to resonate with people that actually might use it, right? So that's what I'm trying to get you to do here with your title, is think about that way that you get them to do that. And so the Great Promise framework here, it's your pinky promise to everybody. It's how to achieve a desired outcome in a time frame without a particular common obstacle. You want to think about that desired outcome being what they desperately want. You want the time frame to create some sort of urgency and sense of believability as well. You don't want it to be so drastic, like how to get $5 million in your bank account in 5 days. I mean, maybe if you're somebody that's just moving money around and you're already a billionaire, maybe that's the only way. But just you have to make your title realistic. And then lastly, what is your common obstacle? You want to think about their biggest fear or frustration. What are those things to actually get people engaged in that as well? And then, you've seen this already, right? So it's, how to get 1,000 webinar attendees in 30 days without spending that fortune in ads. And so, yeah, I would highly encourage you to use the Great Promise framework. The common title mistakes that people oftentimes make, one is just, making vague promises. Learn to be successful. I see a lot of very high level titles in a lot of things that I work on. Whenever I work with life sciences companies, they will build their title, and then still we use our SEO tools to try and go figure out, hey, does this title resonate with your audience or not? Because whether people Google it or not is the greatest indication of of that. So again, I would say test your title would help you with that one. Making it overly complex, sometimes if people don't understand what it is, that can be a great challenge for you. Not having a time frame, just keeping it very obtuse doesn't really help you. Weak obstacles, is another one. And then lastly, that generic outcome of making more money. Having it be specific, believable, and compelling is extremely important in your webinar title. So in the chat, whether you are on LinkedIn or you are on Zoom at this point in time, so on Zoom you can add add it in the chat. Let me know, what is your biggest challenge that you face with webinar marketing. Just let me know what those are. I would love to hear, again from you, and would love to know what your biggest challenges are. And then if you are on LinkedIn, just add a comment, and I'll mention it again while people are typing in their their biggest challenge for me. What I would also like to mention is that if you want to join us on Zoom, feel free to click the link under the LinkedIn session here, and you can join us on Zoom as well and get all the bonuses that are coming with this session. So all right, so let me move on to the next thing while we're watching those comments come in. All right, so the next part of building your webinar here is the magnetic benefit bullets. So you want to have bullets that sort of call out the things that are going to come from the webinar itself. And so in this case, the framework is the specific strategy that got a specific result, even if they run into a common objection. The example here is the 7-minute email template that generated $47,000 in sales, even if you hate writing. So that's the example, here. And I would just, encourage you to sort of think through ways, again, not just to build these, but go test them. Think through the ways that people, might want to take a look at the bullets that you have. So you're going to have the title, and then normally you're going to have, 3 to 5 bullets that sort of call out the things that people are going to get through attending the webinar as well. So you have 2 formulas here as a part of this. The Great Promise formula gets you your title, how to get a desired outcome in whatever time frame without a common obstacle. And then the magnetic bullet formula here is the specific strategy that got a specific result, even if you have a common objection. So there's also another part that I would like to talk about here called the curiosity gap secret. So part of this is we want it to be specific enough so that people, are really drawn into whatever it is, but also vague enough that it creates a level of mystery for them. So, the old way of having, a title could be like on my online marketing tips, but the new way would be how I generated $47,000 from 127 email subscribers using the 3-touch webinar system. And so it's the same content, and what it's doing is, in this case, it's talking about what were the results, what do you need as, kind of that minimum barrier to entry, right? If you have 0 email subscribers, it's kind of, something where people could opt out, where all of a sudden, if people are looking at this going, hey, wait a minute, I have an email list that has 300 email subscribers, and I don't, get any revenue from any of the webinars that I actually do. So how do I get a better outcome, from my webinar? So you have to think about the ways that people are going to opt in and opt out as you're building your title and the way that your webinar is going to come across. So complete this sentence for me, and this will help you talk about your value proposition. So this is your personal value proposition. I help, and then whoever you help achieve what is the outcome without a particular obstacle. So if you would just mind for me in the chat again, could you, just paste in what you're um, seeing overall as your value proposition? I help who achieve what without an obstacle. again, post those in the Q&A for me if you're on Zoom, and if you're in LinkedIn, I'd love to see yours as well. I'm watching LinkedIn. I'm watching as we go along here. So before we hop into the irresistible free gift, let me talk a little bit about, a little bit more about my journey with the webinar formula that I created. So essentially, as I sort of started to think about the issue that I had in the very beginning, where I spent a lot of time preparing for a webinar, and then I, didn't have anybody show up really for the webinar. There were two sort of aspects of this, and luckily I had some great friends at the time, because I told them afterwards. I said it makes me even more apprehensive for the next one. Like, what will happen if nobody shows up to the next webinar? And one of the things that I had happen was somebody had said, "Hey, look, why don't if that happens, why don't you just invite whoever did show up to be with you live, and then you work through whatever the topic was, instead of sort of stepping through something that's structured. You could take an unstructured approach to it, and certainly this would work for certain topics. It's something where you can invite the couple people that showed up. But I kept thinking about, what is it that helps people convert and really go to a webinar. And so that's where I developed this 4UP framework. And so let me share that with you now. I know some of this is going to be hard to read, but I can zoom into different sections as we go along as well. And so that's how I'm going to, kind of, use this section to talk about. So we just developed our webinar topic idea. I've also talked about the webinar bullets over here, where I'm saying the webinar topic aligned in this graphic. What I'm talking about is you've gone out to Google, or you've used Answer the Public to try and figure out whether or not if my topic will resonate. The next part that we're going to talk about is your incredible free gift. So whenever I go back to the slides again, we're going to talk about what is your incredible free gift. But you want to be thinking about this very early. What is it that you want, to sort of share with people as well? And then in the end, what will be your offer? When you get to the end of the webinar, what do you want people to do? What action do you want them to take? And, as you think about the early part, if you're not considering this now, you'll actually miss a really good opportunity to think about that. So I'm going to hit the what is the 4UP framework really quickly, just so you can see it here, and then we'll come back and zoom in on the next section of this. So the 4UP is setup, it's show up, it's follow up, and then lastly, it's level up. So if you think about each one of these sections, that's what I want you to be thinking about is how does that actually resonate with the things that you have to do, right? So in the setup, let's think through this. You're going to have a landing page. I talked about that a minute ago, right? So you're going to have webinar registrants. They're going to go out to a place to register, and whatever that place is, even if it's a LinkedIn post or whatever, I would encourage you to also try and have a private place for people to attend as well. I like LinkedIn for the fact that if you're just passing by and you see that Don has a thing going on, and it might be something that you want to attend, you hadn't planned it, and you click on it and you see that I'm live, you can come in and you can actually comment, and I can see. And for me, it's a great way to just kind of build that additional audience. But also, if you've collected people either in shows, or you've collected email addresses in ways that people book meetings or whatever, you want to then leverage that to try and see whether or not is this a topic that's of value to you or not. And you want to send them to a page where they can check it out and understand more. One of the other things that I quickly mention to people is that there are also people that I don't want to register. I want to make it simple for them. If they want to join, all I want them to do is click a button and say, "Hey, look, I want to join this thing." And so for this, we actually had both. So we had a landing page, but then we also had an email that went out that said, "Hey, if you're interested in joining this thing, all you have to do is click this link, and you will get all the reminders. You'll get all the bonuses. Everything just comes to you. I don't want you to have to register." So it's a very low friction way to get people in. You want to build that initial automation. So if you don't have a CRM, you don't have a way to connect, to collect all these email addresses to do the email automation part of this. I would encourage you to either get one, or later on, I'm going to share a way that you can work with us to get that as well, so that you have the email automation behind this too, so that whenever you have your webinar, it's not just like whoever you're socially connected to on social media platforms, on LinkedIn and places like that, but it's also, ways for people to continue to just stay connected with you as well. Because whenever they're in one of these things, they're raising their hand and saying, yes, I'm very interested in this particular topic. And so you want to stay engaged with them. Then you have email notifications. Quite a few of you got a lot of email notifications about this coming into this. And once somebody comes into the email list, there are two ways that they get out: one, purchasing, or two, just, the simple, hey, look, I don't want to hear about this again, or, just don't contact me again, or unsubscribe. There's always those links as well. And so, certainly there are multiple ways that people can opt out, but put the opting out on them. Because one of the things that I think a lot of people don't take into account today is the fact that um, you may purchase something. I'm just trying to put this in a very personal way. So think about the last thing that you purchased that was primarily driven from something that happened online. When you purchased that thing, did you do it on the first visit and first time learning about it, or was it something where it took multiple times? Maybe you were on an email list, maybe you clicked the link, maybe you did something and social media kept presenting it in front of you. And eventually, hey, look, I've seen this ad 5 times. I was interested in it the first time, because all the social media platforms are watching. Every single time you stop scrolling, it triggers it to say, hey, he liked this ad, so let's keep presenting that ad to him until he buys. And you may see it, 3, 5, 20. I don't know how many times it takes, but again, you don't know that, and you can't interpret it for the person that's getting this email. And so, I would say to people, you don't want to remove people from your email list. You also don't want to just send one email, which is, if you looked at my initial webinar, that was my biggest mistake. I didn't send out enough communication about what we were going to do, what the benefit was, et cetera. And so people, you know, really just didn't join because of the fact that they lost interest and moved on. And then we want the initial automation for the post webinar uh, thought process built as well, kind of out here whenever we're building the landing page. So before I move on to that, I'm going to come back to this part about the free gift. So the irresistible free gift is where you want to boost registration rates by giving something that is of genuine value. I constantly see, lead magnets are what we typically call them, but they're booklets or pamphlets or checklists or whatever that are very low value. Somebody spent very little time thinking about whatever the thing is, and out of that, they they actually shouldn't be surprised whenever nobody opts for whatever the lead magnet is. You want the person that gets it, if it's something to implement, you want them to be able to see some sort of immediate benefit. The F here in the gift is, what is the future outcome connection? So, hey, look, if you liked that particular benefit that you got from this thing, is there a connection back to your bigger paid thing? So whatever that gift is, it should be something that leads back to your paid solution as well. And then, a tangible format preference. So you want to have it, be something that's tangible that somebody can get as well. And by getting something that is a benefit to them, that they see that immediate benefit now, they actually will want to come to you and work with you, because of the fact that, people, see that overall benefit, from it as well. There is a lot of Harvard research around this as well, that by adding a free gift or adding because, you increase compliancy by 93%. And so register for my free webinar is weak and not going to help me get people across. A stronger version of this is register for my webinar because you'll get a complete toolkit that normally sells for $497. People need a reason to justify their actions. And so, think about the things that you do, and this applies as well to people that you're trying to attract. All right. So next question for you here, and looking for responses from the folks, especially here on Zoom. What questions do you have about free gifts or lead magnets? Please drop them in the chat. I'm watching the chat here as well, and would love to see what questions that are coming up for you as we've gone through all of this stuff. All right, not seeing any questions come in. I'm going to move on. So, your transformation story. We started with this today, actually. And the reason why we start with a transformation story is because of the fact that we are activating more areas in the brain. So facts only activate about 2 areas in the brain, where you get 5 areas of the brain whenever you're using your transformation story. You're making people sort of engage more parts of their brain at that point in time. The way that I like to frame this up is a problem, solution, result. So, what is the specific struggle and feelings that you had, um, the breakthrough discovery that you made, and the result and transformation and possibilities. Your story becomes that foundation for people for everything else. So, in the case of the webinar here today, it was, hey, look, I was heartbroken. I was humiliated. I, spent all this time and only 2 people showed up. I had something great to share with people, and unfortunately, people didn't come. And so, in your case, it could be, hey, look, here's a problem that a client ran into. So this does not have to be always you. This could be something that you saw a client struggle with as well. And I've seen this done very successfully, where somebody will say, hey, look, the reason why we work with clients is because of the fact that this framework, really works well. And let me tell you what this person went through before they came to us, and what was the problem. How did they get to a solution? What was the real breakthrough discovery that they had? And then what was that transformation and the possibilities for somebody else? So I'm going to share a framework here as well for you around that problem solution template. So, I mean, we're going to dive into each and every piece, because again, I want you to walk away with, how do I apply this thing in my webinar? So the problem should be 30% of your story. You want to set up the struggle, the pain, and the frustration. I mentioned this a second ago: heartbreak, humiliation, spent a ton of money. What was the specific situation and the emotion, especially, that people, were feeling? And whatever that relatable challenge was, you want to bring that to light for people. So, make sure that you're telling that story in a way that translates the stakes and consequences that people had that came from it as well. If they were suffering for months and spent tons of money, you want to call that out and talk about what were the real challenges that people were having. The discovery or the breakthrough moment. So, what did you learn? What did they try? What was the aha insight? How was it different in the end? So, what actually happened that moved them through? And then the last part, so this is 50% of the story, is what is that transformation? What's the proof? How did specific outcomes um, get achieved because of the fact that people had the result in the end? How was the life or business changed? And then lastly, any sort of lessons that you have for the audience. You want to, again, use this as a teaching moment for folks, and make sure that you've got an opportunity, here to sort of translate it to people. So my story again, I certainly use the embarrassment and the devastation, as something in my own personal story. I made it an obsessive study of conversion psychology. Then what actually causes people then to move forward? How do I get people, to at least listen to what I have to say, even if they don't fully agree with it? Then let's like at least have a conversation about that. How do we actually move people forward? And then I actually started analyzing other webinars, like what is working in these, and also asking people after they had webinars with other companies. So I've interviewed people that have actually paid for companies to help them host webinars and asked them afterwards, did you get leads? What actually happened? And so a lot of times what you hear is, hey, look, we're not allowed to say certain things whenever we're using somebody else's audience. We're very controlled in the way that we actually get those initial people there. Yes, 100 people showed up, nobody interacted, we really didn't have anything at the end of the day in terms of leads. And so, the reality is most of us want some sort of outcome from doing these webinars. You're not just, having a webinar for the sake of having the webinar. You want the audience and then you want that final conversion. So how do you get that, to happen? And I like to tell people, look, I felt like failure in my case, it was a great teacher. There's nothing like falling down to try and figure this out, but also there's an opportunity to then teach people what I learned so that they don't hopefully go through the same pain. So your story needs to include specific believable details about the story. It needs to, talk about that transformation. You want to be vulnerable, but you don't want to overshare, right? So you certainly don't want to, you know, dwell on that fact. You want to build your authority and results. I'll let you read a lot of these other bullet points that are up here, but the whole idea here is to provide some sort of checklist so that you got a way of saying, hey, look, this is either a good story that I can share, or it's something that, actually still needs to be adjusted. So again, in the chat or in the Q&A section, I am seeing your responses on the Zoom call. So if you wouldn't mind, in the Q&A section, let me know, how's this been helpful so far. Let me know in the chat, what is your biggest takeaway so far up to this point. I have a few other things that we're going to cover. We are on the back half of the content that we're going to cover as well. And I wanted to, just quickly check in with folks and get my next quick big drink of water as well to make sure that I'm well hydrated during this thing too. All right. So let's move on to the next section here. And so the last part here is we want to teach that creates desire. And one of the rules that I've heard overall is this 10% rule. I sort of use it in a lot of different applications in my teaching. What I would tell you is that you are definitely today getting more than 10% of my paid offer, and the whole idea here is that I want people to walk away with some sort of transformation that um, is valuable to you. I want you to walk away with something that you can actually apply. If I only applied 10%, you would get a high level sort of overview and then leave here going, "Well, I don't, you wasted an hour." And that's my greatest fear, is that, I feel, this connection to the people that I help. And one of the things that I want to make sure of is that you walk away with something more valuable. And so I would sort of loosely apply this rule, but I think the whole idea here around the 10% rule is that you want to think about whatever your paid solution is. People should feel like they could apply something and go get something done now from attending your webinar, or somehow apply the things that you're trying to teach. But at the same time, that working from you would bring even more value. And so that's kind of the philosophy I live by, and it's what I want people to walk away with, is that I want people to see that there's enough value here to actually, get you started. And if you need help with that final part, I'm here, right? I'm certainly here. I have ways to help you and want to do that with people. I'm not just, teaching for the sake of teaching. I want to be able to provide specific and actionable insights as well. So let's go back to the diagram in this, right? So we talked about your story creation. You want to think through your offer and finalizing that, right? So this is still the setup. I mean, I'm not talking about anything other than the setup portions of this. So you think about all the work that's gone into it here. When you pull all the pieces together, you're going to see this slide in a minute as well, with some time breakdowns in the slides that I have. But you want to think through the rapport that you have with the audience is your story. Then you want to teach, you want to do some validation with everybody. You want to get that engagement, right? I'm asking at several different times, hey, look, give me in your give me your input in terms of the things that you're learning today. And getting that engagement is really important. You want overall for people to take action from the thing that they're learning. So how are they going to take action? And from that action, then that again starts them on their journey. And then lastly, you want them to turn into leads for you. So the one thing I oftentimes tell people is that most people focus right here on webinars. It's finalizing the slides and hosting the webinar, on whatever platform that you have. And so this is where everybody focuses. But the reality, think about all the work that has gone into the webinar up to this point, right? So there's all this part that's gone into it. And this arrow that's coming over from the other side of the screen is the email follow-up with the slides and the replay, right? So most people send out some form of the slides and the replay afterwards, say, hey, look, here's the slides and the replay. What I would tell you is that, also offer to schedule a call. Who knows? Maybe there's somebody in there that learned something, that maybe they have a private question that they want to ask you. There's some other value that you can offer to people as well. Providing some level of a helpful tip or article is another way to do that as well. And so, just think through like all the ways that you can do this. Now, I had somebody recently tell me that their series after a webinar is something like 54 emails. I was pretty surprised that their series of emails were like 54. But you kind of think about the level of keeping in touch that you could do afterwards. But that's kind of what this is a start of, is that, and that's the follow-up section. The bottom section down here, what I call it is long-term KIT. And so what KIT stands for is keep in touch. I mentioned it a second ago. And so what I've developed throughout time is that there are points in time where let's say I have a phone call with somebody, and Richard was on earlier. He's somebody that I just recently had a phone call with. So, with Richard, I want to stay in touch with Richard. I don't want to, just connect with him once. I'd like to talk to him, again at some point in the future. And so maybe a month from now, he gets an email from me. And then maybe a couple of months from then, he gets another email from me. I'm not saying like inundate somebody with a bunch of emails. That's not the idea here. And I think a lot of us see this sort of email traffic today where you just get, a lot of spam sort of stuff that doesn't really help you. But think about like if you're somebody like Janet, where you're offering like quality services and you're offering technical solutions for life science or medical device companies, you want to sort of just stay in touch with people with things that are valuable to them. So how could you create a list of things that would be valuable to people throughout time, is what I'm asking all of you. Is, think about the ways that you can add something to somebody, and by them seeing that, it might trigger another phone call, it might trigger another follow-up or what have you. So as we get to the back end of the webinar here, I just wanted to make sure that we close out, like, what does that look like, and how does this sort of, start to fall into place, so that exactly, how to carry things forward with your audience for your webinar as well. I mentioned the reveal method a second ago, and I'm going to come back to this now. So we've talked about all these pieces, right? So they're pieces of your webinar. You're doing the rapport building. You have your educational element, you're doing some validation with people, you're getting engagement from them, you're asking them to take action. And then the last part is the lead generation. So how do you, in the last 5 minutes or so, switch to lead generation and getting them much more involved in whatever your solution is? And so I would encourage you, to think about that fact as well, that as all these pieces come together, this is what the overall webinar then looks like. It is all of these pieces tied together. And if you only do the education part and you haven't carried through on the other parts, your audience won't be as engaged. You won't have them, throughout time. And so you can lose people, throughout that. So I'm going to come back here, and as we wrap up, I just wanted to share with you a couple of other bonuses that I have for you. So one of the things that I would love to know from people, and just provide it in the comments. So I created an AI chat GPT tool that will help you create the entire framework for your webinar. And if you'd like to see that in the content and conversion community, what I would ask is, post in the Q&A again, post in there that you would like that GPT for sure, and I will drop it in the course. If nobody comments, then that's fine. I will leave it with the paid solution that we have. So on the paid solution, let me just talk about that for a moment. So for people, what I'm calling this is a founding member exclusive. And so I've created a community called the Digital Spotlight Community. The people that are in that community right now are people that are paying clients of mine that are already, using me for social media, or they have us doing something else for them, whether it's, helping them with their what do you call it? Their CRM. I don't know why those initials were passing my mind by, but they were for a second. So whether they're asking us to help them with their CRM, or they're asking us to do social media marketing, et cetera, you know, they're in that community. So here are the bonuses for everybody. So anybody that goes through and pays the annual amount for the Digital Spotlight community, you are a founding member, and for $670, essentially what you're going to get is access to me for 60 minutes. Essentially, I will do whatever I can to help you in a one-on-one, where I'll identify the biggest obstacles that you're having with regards to your webinar, and help you consistently be seen online for that webinar. Secondly, we have a Go High Level CRM. It's white label under us. Roughly, if you went to directly to Go High Level and bought this from them, it would be $1,100 out of pocket for you just to go get that. And so we will do the setup and the training with you on it, and we will help you with our webinar automations as well, to get those in place as well. If you have some other CRM, we could still help you with the emails. But I don't know other CRMs. I'll just be transparent about that. I tell people all the time, I'm like, look, I was a short-time HubSpot guy. I used Pipedrive for an awful long time. But I haven't really in depth used Zoho or anybody else's CRM. And so, I can help you with the email automation, strategizing that, kind of how things should look, and then how to sort of, consider keeping people engaged. So yeah, I mean, I definitely would tell you that we would, help you with the email section of that as well for this. And then also, you're going to get a course that goes much more in depth in terms of these elements. There's only so much of this that I can teach in an hour. And you've heard me like continually talk through this entire time. And so, what I try to do is to make sure that, you are stepped through each one of these elements, so that in the end, you have all the structure that you need to actually carry out your webinar. It is right now 7 modules. I can actually bring it up here. I've got it, up on the screen here, and so you see kind of the different modules. I've got the different, webinar power tools down here at the bottom. What I was just talking about was I'll make this Ultimate Webinar Strategist Pro a part of the content and community, which is not today. So I will add that bonus over there for the attendees. I see people saying, "Hey, look, I want to have that GPT added." So certainly we'll add that AI tool so that you've got that too. But for anybody that's currently working with us, you guys have the access to this course right now. And for anybody else, I would encourage you to become a founding member of the Digital Spotlight community. And I will drop that link again back into the chat so that everybody can see that. And then also it will go out in the email follow-up as well in case you miss it here in the Zoom. So just to encourage people, we're only going to leave that window open for a short period of time, to be a founding member, primarily because we're going to continue to add value. We have a Thursday call every Thursday morning where we're getting together and we're talking about different topics that people are challenged in with regards to business, and it really sort of centers around this framework over here. Let me just switch screens again. Zooming out and zooming in is one of those things that there we go. So the Digital Spotlight community is going to cover brand and foundation refinement. It's going to focus in on business model and evolution focus. We will touch on, platforms like content mastery. How do you get, the best out of all of the different platforms that are out there, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, et cetera. And then also, how do you get to that point of advanced lead generation as well? Helping you scale your business and think about that. There's a lot of topics that I cover with a lot of my clients around, how do we automate certain things, and certainly that door is open for anybody that's in this community as well. And then lastly, what are the advanced monetization strategies that you can have? So hopefully this time with me has been very valuable. I hope that I've contributed to your webinar journey. I really appreciate everybody that is on as well. And I'm thankful for each and every one of you. Anybody that's engaged, I'm certainly, really encouraged by seeing the people join here. For anybody that wants to just meet with me live as well, I'm happy to do that. Just respond back to one of my emails and just say, hey, look, I'd like to have, live conversation with you too. And, happy to get on a phone call with you one-on-one. So thanks a lot for joining. I really appreciate it. And, wish you all the best with your webinars. I hope that, in your journey with webinars that it has been, this has been helpful, and that, at the end of the day that I've contributed to you somehow. Thanks a lot and have a great week. Take care.